bit dry out there apart from the lower part of the North Island.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it becomes quite deceptive when people see Wanganui and other areas and how bad it's been for them. And if you start digging down a little bit in the soil here, we're as dry as anything, especially on the east coast of both islands. So we may get a dusting of snow this week. We've got a few 17 mils of rain or whatever. It's gone nowhere. It's settled the dust and probably gone on a little bit, but it's deceptively dry, and I don't quite know what we can do about it. I mean, it's just typical El Nino. We're getting these northerly conditions, we're getting cold conditions, we're getting dry cold, and today is no exception to that. So growers have just got to monitor. What they must try and avoid is having to go into a big rehydration job going into the spring, which is only sort of 6 weeks away, really. Hopefully we'll have a good, nice bit of winter before that. Well, the winter continues on the way it is, but with some moisture. So snow doesn't bring a lot of moisture. It might bring 4 inches of snow on the ground, but it only adds to
it's 1 inch of water.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got to be aware of that, and going into spring we've got to be fully hydrated. So maybe the irrigators will be going on probably in September or even a wee bit earlier, very early September anyway.
Does that mean that your herbicide management is different because it's dry?
It certainly does, because a lot of the residual herbicides, there's not a lot being used these days, but they're still used on specific hard-to-kill weeds. Now, if the ground hasn't got the moisture in it, they're not going to work so well. And they're not going to work later on either. They're going to dissipate slowly into the soil or up into the air. So the growers have got to make judgment calls on that. They're reasonably experienced, they should be able to, or their advisors certainly should be able to. But if you've got a residual herbicide, mainly all the residual herbicides, what they do, they actually adhere to the soil particles. They'll only adhere to them if those particles are damp or moist. If they're not, if they're dryish, if you can grab a handful of soil and it falls away rather than keeps the shape of your hand, it's too dry for herbicide to actually cling on to and become active. Because the residual herbicide goes into the soil profile. The weed seeds are germinated obviously under that. They come through, they hit the herbicide, they die, so we don't see them. This year, come the spring, I think we could see a few. So we may have to roll the regime a little bit around to just knock down materials, so the glyphosates and the probably glyphosate this time of the year, and maybe the wider spectrum but easier, softer materials come September, October.
Okay. Now, organic phosphates coming under the spotlight.
Yeah, the EPA, they made a comment yesterday about how organophosphates, this particular chemical group, which is nasty insecticides, which we've used a heap of over the years, the old diazonons and azinphosmethyls and those sort of things. They are slowly being phased out. But what the comment they made was that it has to be applied by approved people. Now, we've got an approved handler system have been going for at least 7 or 8 years now. So already the growers have got to be approved handlers to actually apply those materials, or they have to have, Mr. Farmer has to have an approved handler on his property. He doesn't necessarily, that person doesn't necessarily have to be the person who's physically putting the chemical on.
Providing they can supervise.
Providing they can supervise. The theory is that they must be able to get assistance within 10 to 15 minutes if something goes wrong. Now, fortunately, not very many things do go wrong these days because growers are diligent. Having said that, they can. And these organophosphates come 3 to 5 years, and acetates actually, carbonates, sorry, they're the other group, they will be out of our system altogether. And there's some good, softer, but still effective insecticides coming along through the system as we speak.
So, tell me all about the global gap as well.
Yeah, well, this leads on to part of the certification that farmers or accreditation farmers should have and growers should have is Grow Safe, which is the basic course which just tells you the main principles of how you should handle and store pesticides. And it's a really good course, very, very easy, very basic, but it's necessary that people get up to speed with that one. That follows on that the property has to be accredited also. And it's either approved under European GAP or Global GAP or New Zealand GAP. They are equivalent in terms of their meaning, but they are two different words. Because some produce, likes of apple, the apple industry, the kiwi fruit industry, require Global GAP certification to export fruit out of New Zealand. So the grower's got to have Global GAP certification. New Zealand GAP covers a lot of other fruit and vegetables, which also can go globally. So either way,
nothing confusing then.
and yeah, just to keep it simple, I mean, what we should be calling our New Zealand gap is global gap, and then everybody's on the same page. But sometimes bureaucracy gets in the road, and that's a really good example of it.
So we are actually sort of globally up to the global level.
Oh, absolutely we are. Yeah, absolutely we are.
But it's just that it rose by any other name.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think some of the bigger industries, such as even the wine industry, pip fruit industry, kiwi fruit industry, the big number stuff, they say, hey, listen, you guys need global. And now it's an extra certificate that they receive, but they go through the same questionnaire and the same audit system. So what we really should be doing is, instead of Wellington trying to justify a little bit of probably remuneration or whatever, that it should all be global gap and everybody be happy and everybody would be understanding of what goes on. Because I get asked regarding blackcurrant growers, well, this New Zealand gap, is it up to global gap standard? So you've got to write a letter to say, yes, it's up to global gap standard.
I mean, it seems like a no-brainer.
It is a no-brainer. And I'm sure common sense will prevail. I mean, EPA have gone through a lot of changes of late over the last 2 or 3 years. And it's sort of amalgam and part of MPI. And with the reduction of staff and the changing of staff, all these things have sort of got a bit messed up, I believe. But common sense will
sort of prevail.
Will prevail.
I mean, you as an industry, you must be going and knocking on doors and saying, hey, listen, guys, what's your problem?
Yeah, we do. And they come back with some pretty good answers of why they haven't got time to resolve it at this point in time. But we can live with that. The main and critical thing is that the farmers and growers must be accredited in this way. And it's this time of the year they usually have the courses going all the time of the year, but this is the time of the year that the growers and the farmers have got the time to take their staff or themselves to get themselves up to speed. It's every 3 or 5 years, so it's not an arduous task and it's not an expensive one.
And it's a beneficial one.
Well, absolutely, it's a must. I mean, an exporter by definition is not allowed to accept fruit or vegetables, for instance, from a grower that is not accredited accordingly.